today, and I just want to welcome you all to our hub meeting for September 18th. Our picture here is one that Nicole Witham took, our statewide program coordinator, when she was visiting the University of Washington back in February. Seems like a lifetime ago. Students walking around campus, and she was there to collaborate on a seminar that happened at the University of Washington. I think it was focused on protein for the planet. That's what I put there. So I'm hoping that was the theme for the February event. So today we will have an overview of the WSU Food Systems Hub, and I'm joined today by Nicole Witham, Abba Kaiser, and Tia Taylor, all of the folks that work in the Food Systems office. And we're going to have an update on the Organic Seed Alliance's virtual field day. So Abba's going to jump in and give us a quick update on the field day that's happening. And I know that Kelly Henwood's on the call as well. Not to put you on the spot, Kelly, but you might want to, I don't know if you want to give a quick plug too for the Jefferson County virtual farm tour as well. And then we have a presentation today by Jennifer Otten from the University of Washington. So we're going to be talking about the WAFOOD project, which was a collaboration between the University of Washington, Washington State University, and Tacoma Community College. And then we'll have time to share as well. Obviously, 2020 just continues to challenge all of us with the smoke over the last couple of weeks, as well as the devastating fires. I'm sure that we have plenty that we can share with one another. Again, talking specifically about how to support one another, but also how to support Washingtonians and the food system throughout all of these crises. And it's exciting as well. That's not exciting, but it's exciting to, at least in the survey, point to some of the, Jen's going to be talking about some of the, at least the silver linings of COVID and some of the things that people found were positive. So it does feel like it's been almost all negative, but there are always those points that we can share about that are positive. And I think it's been really amazing to see people continue to come together to support one another as we go through this tumultuous year. So I'm going to move forward with talking a little bit about our program. I just want to welcome everyone. Please introduce yourself in the Zoom chat box. Let us know who you are, where you're located, and what you do. And please update the chat box with events, resources, links to websites that you want to share. It's a great place to ask questions. We see a lot of side discussion happening in the chat, and we encourage you all to use it. So a little bit about the WSU Food Systems program. We were the small farms team, and about 3.5 years ago, we merged or evolved into the food systems program and really developed out several focus areas beyond sustainable farming practices, which is still really the foundation of our work, working with small enterprise farms. Across the state, we seek to work with communities throughout the state to foster viable farm businesses, optimize sustainable natural resource stewardship, and to promote scaled processing and distribution, always in the pursuit of access to healthy food for all. We span the state in terms of our work and the network of team members that we have. So Washington has 39 counties, and we have extension offices in all of them, as well as on the Colville Reservation. We also have team members affiliated with research, agricultural extension research centers throughout the state, as well as our campuses. So a little bit about the WSU Food Systems Hub. The purpose of the hub is to provide a space to connect regularly with both WSU and external partners working to support the Washington food system, to collect and update COVID-19 resources specifically that are related to supporting the Washington food system, and also to provide time and space to share stories and receive support from one another. I want to remind you all about our calendar of events. So you can go to our website and just scroll down to the bottom of the page. You'll see several events that are listed, and you can go to that calendar of events as well and see things that are coming up. I'm sure, and Nicole, I don't know if you want to put a quick plug in right now about cultivating success, since that was at the very top of our calendar of events.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone. Nicole Witham, statewide coordinator for the WSU Food Systems Program. I also help to coordinate a big network of cultivating success instructors who are our small farms, ag, and food system coordinators throughout the state that are in extension. There are 14 counties and 2 reservations that are getting ready to be host sites for a whole farm planning course that will be starting on October 22nd. If you know anybody that would be interested in it, please help spread the word. Folks do not have to be residents with any of the counties that are providing the course, but we just ask that they pick a class that's near them. There are also going to be scholarships for military veterans and, of course, anyone else who sees the fee for enrollment as a barrier. The course is a 9-week course over with 1 week where we will be having a break, and it will be $125. It's really a great opportunity to get the step-by-step process of creating a whole farm plan and getting all of the kind of tools in your toolkit to really think through your farming practices and if farming is really right for you in general. So I will put some more information in the chat. We have Facebook events and information on our webpage. So thank you for sharing.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So I'm going to invite Abba to say a few words about the Organic Seed Alliance's virtual field tours. And I know sometimes Kara's on the call as well. So if Kara's there, please chime in as well.
Kara, are you here?
She's probably, I think they have another tour at 11 today. So I'm assuming.
Oh, that's right. They're live right now.
They're live right now.
Well, we can check that out. So yeah, so hi everyone, Abba Kaiser here. I am the project manager with the WSU Food Systems Program. And I like to say that my night job, WSU Food Systems is my day job, and then my night job is Organic Seed Alliance. I'm just an intern with them this summer, but it's been really fun. And they're doing virtual field tours this week, which I got to be a part of. And you can see on their story that they're on Instagram that there are quite a bit. Every day has a different topic. So they're really just sharing out this week all about their research projects. So their live broadcasts, they're happening from 10 a.m. They last about 40 minutes. They're covering all these different trials and topics with their various research projects with Novik and Tomi, and they've got sweet corn trials in collaboration with Viva Farms and some of the folks that are on the call. So it's just a really fun interactive way for people to get on the farm. Usually we would be having in-person events at this time. And so this is just a way that they can virtually bring people to Chimacum and talk a little bit about the varieties that they've seen doing well out here on the peninsula. I think the tomato video had a couple hundred views from yesterday. And you can tune into their IGTV channel to watch the rest of the videos if you're interested. And they believe that today they are doing carrots, which is really exciting. We have built about 20 pollination cages for the different carrot trials that are happening out there. And we have over 50 varieties of French cabbages growing. So if you're interested in the very specifics of different varieties and how they perform in the field, you can go to the IGTV website on Instagram, and you can see the videos that we recorded this week. And I think that they're doing one right now. So let's see if we can just pop in here for a second. Yeah, here we go. So they're doing, talking about carrot cages. You probably can't hear it super well right now, but this is Michaela Colley. She is, she knows a lot about plants and she's happy to share it. So I think that's all I have to say about it. I guess we can't all just join their Instagram live right now, unless we're like hyper multitaskers, but you know, it's up to you, I guess. And
Thanks,
it's just
Abba.
a cool way. It's been a good lesson for me about how to best practices in terms of engaging a virtual audience, especially as we are continuing in these times of bringing everything online. And I'd be curious to talk with folks after this about, you know, what they found to be most successful, and kind of based on what their goals are for engagement, how they've measured that. So I think that's it. And just a little fun thing to inspire you for the week.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure if someone was enough of a carrot nerd, they could probably multitask and do both the hub and it's like flipping back and forth between TV shows, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're excited about our partners being able to still host this event. Before we jump into today's presentation, I wanted to just invite Kelly, if she was on the line as well, to say anything about the virtual farm tour this weekend. And I don't know if anyone else has events that they want to just put a quick plug for right now as well that are happening this weekend. This is typically the time of year we did a lot of our harvest events and farm tours throughout the state.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That's awesome. I just put in the link to our Jefferson County Farm Tour. It used to be an in-person event where it's a self-guided tour of farms, but it's all virtual this year. It's happening this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, in partnership with WSU Extension, as well as a nonprofit called the Production Alliance. And it's actually pretty interesting. The silver lining is we have more farms participating than ever because it's virtual. So there's 22 farms who will be quote unquote hosts for the weekend. And what that really looks like is we have really cool profiles and stories of each farm. Some volunteer photographers have taken some beautiful photographs, and then we'll also have pre-recorded farm fresh videos and also some live presentations happening over the weekend, as well as connecting community members with some resources to go purchase a bunch of yummy food from local farms and do some home preservation and canning. So shout out to our WSU food preservation resources. So check it out and we'll see how it goes. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Anything else that anyone wants to throw in there really quick while we're talking about these events before we get started? We can always come around to it at the end as well, or you can populate the chat box. Great, well, it is my pleasure to be able to introduce Jennifer Otten from the University of Washington. So I believe it was about 2 years ago that I had the pleasure of going to meet Jen and Yona Sipos over at the University of Washington to speak with them about our newly formed WSU Food Systems program and their newly formed Food Systems, Nutrition, and Health major at the University of Washington, which I'd love for Jen to be able to talk a little bit about that today as well. Since we had that conversation, we've partnered on 2 academic seminars. One of them was to help support having farmers there from Viva Farms. So we helped sponsor a seminar last fall, I believe it was, on Latinx farmers in Washington State. And then this winter, Nicole facilitated a discussion on protein for the planet. And Kate Smith was part of that seminar series back in the fall. It might have even been longer ago, but I think it was about a year ago. And since then, we've also been able to partner on numerous projects, including the WAFOOD survey, which Jen's going to talk about today. We're working right now on another similar project with tribal communities. We're also working on a higher education collaboration between the University of Washington and WSU, looking at our academic programs. We are also partnering on a survey following up with the WSDA's work earlier this year around COVID. So it's a collaboration between WSDA, the University of Washington, and WSU. And then Jen and I also participate on a small team working to support soil health and the food system. And I'm sure I just scratched the surface. It's been really an honor to be able to work with the University of Washington and these folks on so many amazing projects. And we're just really excited about all of the future opportunities that are still out there. So I'd love to invite Jen to get started. I'm going to go ahead and share her, or let her share her screen. And I know she's going to end the presentation with the WAFOOD team as well, but you can see up here, it was really Adam Drunowski and Jennifer who are the main co-PIs of this project. And so it's exciting that we have Jen here to be able to talk about it in person, virtually, but in person.
Thank you, Laura. And I agree, this collaboration that we've had over the past few years just keeps growing, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And I can see, as we, learn more about each other, we have been, I feel like it's really helped the projects that we're working on together. And you'll see that in the WAFOOD survey that I'm about to present as soon as I figure out how to share my screen. Hold on one second. Okay, do you see the, yes, okay, great.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so as Laura talked about, this was a collaboration between UW and WSU, and also with Tacoma Community College. And I can't tell you what a great collaboration it's been, both in terms of using our strengths to really recruit and disseminate people, but also just in how we touch different parts of the food system. So that's been a real strength here. So this was a survey, we really wanted to know how Washington State residents were doing during COVID in terms of their food security, economic security, and food access. So we got together and created this survey and then deployed it in about mid-June through the end of July. And as you can see here on this slide, we had about, we had 2,621 respondents in 38 of 39 counties. And again, WSU was critical in really, working with extension partners and many of you on this particular call to figure out how to disseminate and recruit so that we could get a statewide survey. The goals of the survey were really to look at employment, income and food assistance, food security and food shopping patterns, and also to understand really in detail barriers and supports to federal and state programs before and since the pandemic. So one of the unique things about this survey is that we asked people, were you accessing this before COVID, and now how are you accessing it? So it's not like we're looking at data in many cases that was just, generic data that existed before COVID. We're literally learning about how COVID has shaped people's lives before and after. Just to give you a sense, I said that we covered 38 of 39 counties. So this is all participants geocoded by zip code. And we will eventually do some analyses looking at things by zip code and trying to understand geographically. But right now, this is just giving you the distribution of our sample. You can see that we had a lot of respondents from King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, and there were quite a few from Spokane and on the eastern side as well. And then you can see some of the counties that had fewer. This is just to give you a sense of how our survey participants compared to King County and Washington State. And you can see that in many cases, we very closely mirrored some of the demographics, and in others, we were farther off in terms of our representation and maybe more closely mirrored the western side of the state. So this is the beginning of the results. First and foremost, we wanted to know how was everyone doing? What did food insecurity look like? And overall, we see rates, 30% of households were food insecure. Of that 30%, almost 2/3 of them had children in the household. This graph is really showing you the disparities by income, education, race, ethnicity, and marital status. And you can see that even though overall 30% of households were food insecure, we can see that in lower income households, we're seeing food insecurity rates between 50 and 60%. And you can see high rates for those with who have some college or less education, for persons of color, and for single and divorced. So some disparities were being exacerbated. We wondered, okay, if food insecurity is rising, what does that mean? How are people taking up food assistance? And so you see here that at first you might think this is sort of curious, but people report in the 12 months before COVID and then since COVID, how they're using each of these food assistance programs. And you can see in some cases it went down after COVID, and in some cases it went up. So it went down for SNAP and school meal programs, but use of food banks slightly increased, summer school meals increased, city vouchers and cards increased, and mobile food boxes increased. One of the things that we're hypothesizing here about, why there was change, like different change, is that there was sort of this brief bobble in terms of people knowing how to access programs remotely suddenly, right? All of the suddenly in-person appointments had to go remote, or maybe SNAP users needed to use their benefits online, and initially they couldn't use them online until Washington State and the feds issued the waiver to allow purchase online. So we think that maybe some of the initial decrease might be related to that. Another piece we've hypothesized is that during the time we were surveying, people were receiving supplemental funds for unemployment benefits, for SNAP, and many had received stimulus checks. And I'll show you a little bit about how many in our sample did in a few slides. And so maybe they weren't at a point yet where they needed to apply for food assistance, thinking that COVID might be over soon or something. And then the third reason we're kind of hypothesizing we're seeing the numbers the way they are is sort of thinking about in our sample, I don't have this cut out in the data for you to see, but you can definitely see that there were some people who are what we're calling newly food insecure, people who had never been food insecure before and were suddenly having to use food assistance programs that they had never even thought about before very suddenly. And so they may not have as clear of a pathway of how to use these programs initially. So those were some of the hypotheses that we're hoping to explore a little bit more deeply later. So talking about each of these food assistance programs and understanding a little bit about them was important to us. And so you can see of our sample, about 364 were using SNAP during the shutdown. And overall, the majority were, they were satisfied with these benefits. You can see that the vast majority is fully using their SNAP monthly. But in terms of this online, as I was saying, suddenly you could use your SNAP dollars online, and a lot of people still, even through July, had not used SNAP online. Some of them still were not aware they could use their SNAP benefits online. And then that third category below, there were definitely people who lived in geographic regions where maybe it wasn't accessible online yet. Maybe the grocery store didn't have a way for them to order it online. So just to begin to kind of get the lay of the land here as well. When we looked at WIC recipients, we didn't have as many respondents who were WIC recipients in our sample. Only 63 of the 2,600 were WIC recipients. But you can see that of those, most were satisfied with their benefits. Many selected that food choice was limited, and that the inability to use WIC online was cited as a common barrier to use. And you can also see that less than half were fully using their WIC monthly receipts. We don't have detail on why that is, but just based on some of the news articles, you could see that stores often weren't able to stock the specific foods that WIC users were within what their benefits allowed them to purchase. This slide is on food banks. And we had quite a few of the respondents who used food banks in this sample, so about 524 of them. About half said they were satisfied. There was a lot going on with the food banks in terms of people's experience amid COVID-19. And so you can see some of the, I won't go through each of these. I'll provide these slides to Nicole and she can share these, and you can look over this in detail later. A couple of the things I want to point out, though, is that, people were still, you can still see that even, if you drop down to that very bottom line, I think needs a little bit more exploration in future surveys. is that about 1/5 of the sample needed public transport in order to visit their food bank. And so maybe understanding that geographically might be really important. And then up at the top that you see, people, while they're satisfied, they're only able to make limited visits. So maybe it's something they can do less frequently because of the hours or the time they have, or something along those lines. Many in the sample worried that they didn't qualify for food assistance. So of the, almost 900 respondents who received food assistance, almost half of them worried that they wouldn't qualify. And again, transportation came up in this as well, that about 1/3 noted that it was difficult to travel to and from food program offices if that was needed. And so you can kind of get a sense of some of the other barriers to food assistance program usage here around benefits maybe not being sufficient. There still, were troubles around online certification. About a quarter were embarrassed about use or don't want to use or think there might be too much paperwork. We asked about eating habits, how are people rating their diets? How are things changing in terms of what they were eating? 1/3 of respondents reported fair or poor diets, and many said that their diet worsened during the pandemic. And so what you see here is people reported on whether they were eating more or less or about the same of each of these food categories. And you can see that people reported eating more of the eggs, rice, and beans. But at the very bottom of the graph, you can see that they reported much less meat, fish, and shellfish. So whether they were having trouble accessing that or the cost of it was going up, may have been contributing to that. They weren't, I wanted to show this one first because it actually, I meant to switch the order here. They were not worried about access to chocolate, candy, sugary drinks, or any of these types of foods. So there were some foods they were not concerned about at all.
I know. I remember when we saw that, and we just had to kind of laugh. We're like, well, at least the junk food aisle is secure.
Yeah, we can all access the chocolate we need to cope. So in this slide, we see they had confidence in food access, but people sort of reported higher costs and that there were shortages. So about 3/4 of the sample were confident in their ability to access the foods they needed over the next 4 weeks. But you can see that many reported they had reduced access to things like flour and baking supplies. I think this aligns with what many of us were reading in the news about people not getting yeast and flour, and hearing stories of that. Reduced access to meat was reported by about 1/3 of the sample. And I think many of us saw reports of that in the news, if not in the stores near us as well. And you can see they were, the types of foods they were less concerned about toward the bottom of the graph. All right. Some of the issues people reported in experiencing and accessing food, the top 2 were that food is getting more expensive and that they didn't feel safe shopping in the supermarket. And I think this probably doesn't surprise many of us. Again, as we go down this graph, public transportation pops up again in about 1/4 of the sample. And, we see that economic security is really related to whether they can go in and buy 2 weeks worth or 3 weeks worth of food rather than having to go more frequently and maybe expose themselves to a supermarket that they don't see as safe or they feel less safe. So, all of these things are highly interconnected, obviously, in terms of how people feel about accessing food and the different pathways that they do it. One of the interesting things that we're planning on doing with this sample, and just to kind of give you a sense, we broke out how many of the people in our sample were essential workers versus non-essential workers. And we see a little over half of our sample held what was an essential job. So they reported whether they were considered to be an essential worker. And these were the types of occupations that were held by the essential workers. So you can see more of them are found in social services, healthcare, and food services. We are planning on trying to look at all of these measures by stratifying by whether they were essential and non-essential workers. But one of the very first interesting things about this graph is that we're going to have to stratify further, because what we see is that in the essential worker categories, even, there were many higher income people working in healthcare, and some of the lower income jobs were, in social services and food services. So there may be kind of like a bifurcation in how these different groups are experiencing food insecurity and some of the food access barriers. And then the next slide, these are the job categories that are non-essential workers were more likely to be found in. These were the industries that they reported. So you see IT, education. There was some healthcare that could be non-essential, some food-based services that were non-essential, and so forth. Okay, so in terms of, now I'm going to turn a little bit to kind of the employment and economic security type responses that we got in the survey. And in this case, you can see that many are working from home and others are experiencing lost or job hours. When we asked about employer adjustments to the shutdown, you can see the top two categories were both about equal in terms of people reporting it, saying that either the essential workers had to come into work and others could work from home, or all employees were encouraged or required to work from home. As you drop down into this particular graph, I think some of the interesting things that jump out is that about a quarter of the sample are seeing their hours reduced. And if you drop even further down, that 11% and that 7%, you can see that these are, maybe about a fifth of our sample has either had their jobs, they've either lost their jobs or they've been temporarily closed in some way. So that's quite a big number. And since the pandemic continues, we expect maybe the next time point, this might be even greater. In terms of the types of workplace benefits, though, that people reported, when we asked what would happen if they got sick, how would they cope given their current employment, 62% said they could use paid time off, and then about 38% said that they could use paid medical leave. And then others had more flexible working schedules that could play into that. We were curious how many received stimulus checks and unemployment benefits, and you can see that about 3/4 or a little over 3/4 of Washington residents surveyed reported receiving a stimulus check, and 28% of respondents reported receiving unemployment. However, almost half of those reported difficulty in applying for employment benefits. And again, we're hoping to look at the data stratifying by some of these types of measures to understand how those who've lost jobs or our unemployment might be differently experiencing some of these outcomes. And then finally, before this will be kind of the last content slide, there were some positive outcomes, as Laura had mentioned, and these were positive outcomes. People were asked if there were any positive outcomes amid COVID-19, and almost half of them said they had more free time to enjoy preparing food and mealtime. Many of them appreciated people in their community helping one another out to access food. And then a third of the sample said that local grocers and restaurants really stepped up to help by stocking healthy foods. And you can see some of the other things that they reported: community leaders listening, connecting with local farmers, and then, accessing the food assistance services in your community. We have some other data that I don't have in this, we haven't analyzed yet, but around what other information they might need. And I think this particular group will be really interested in that, because we asked about, are you interested in more nutrition information? What about preservation, canning? What types of things would you need now to help store food? And so we'll try to get that data to you soon. And then we have some other questions we asked about food self-sufficiency. So are people gardening more? Are they, did they buy chickens? What are the types of things that they did to become more food self-sufficient? And so we'll have some of that data out soon as well. And then I'm going to leave these in for you all. This is just all of the key findings I went through summarized. And so, you can kind of have the more bulleted list. And again, I just want to acknowledge everyone on this call who helped out. Washington State University Extension was really key to getting out into those communities. And we're incredibly thankful for all of the work and support that you provided. And then if you want to see the report brief or more information about other states, you can visit that first link. Will give you the report brief. That second link, while it takes you to Washington State, there's actually a bunch of other states who are running similar surveys, and you can see how we compare. And then there's the team again. So I'm happy to take any questions anyone might have.
Jen, thank you. That was such a great overview. And there's just so much more data still. It's just incredible. We've just scratched the surface. So I'd love to open it up for questions. I know that I saw Abba asked a question earlier. If you had heard of photo voice or most significant change as a data collection tool. She said she knows of a local project about using WIC checks revealed transportation as a major factor in access.
Yes, I mean, I do know about photo voice, but we did not use it in this particular project, but I love photo voice. Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I'm not remembering the study. I think Rita Ordonez has more information about it, but it was a study about how folks use WIC checks and just the barriers to access, and just the transportation factor ended up coming up again and again, which was just really came out in your results as well. So I thought it might be nice to connect you two and see if there was some similarities, or I think it was done in Seattle as well, but I don't want to speak to that without knowing for sure.
Great. That sounds really interesting. Yeah, it would be good to, some of those stories will help contextualize a lot of these results. So I think that's great.
Other questions? Or just reaction to the research in general? I know as a research team, it was really interesting to wrap our heads around the changes in access to benefits. We were anticipating a much larger increase in the use of some of those benefits. And so to actually see some of them, the use decrease, and knowing that we'd love to be able to go back and deploy the survey at a later time and see how those trends, what that is trending like now. But that was definitely something that was I wouldn't say startling, but we knew that Washingtonians, where the population of food insecure was basically doubling, and so not to necessarily see that in the data was really interesting. Well, I wanted to at least just bring up some of the information we saw about diet change, because I feel like that was really also, and I'd love for other folks to pipe up as well. That was something we saw. I think it was over 30% of people said that they already had sort of substandard diets to begin with, and that 40% felt that their diet had worsened since COVID. So just in terms of thinking about that from a long-term health perspective, but just in general, and that's something we didn't present necessarily, but we did collect a lot of data on specific food types that were being purchased, and you saw some of that, but kind of trying to drill down and understand whether people are buying more shelf-stable and packaged foods, and it did seem that that was the case. So yeah, I want to see, someone just wrote here, when do you expect the additional data regarding what people would like to know about be analyzed?
Well, I guess I can comment on the next data briefs that we're planning. So the next round of data briefs that we're working on are by county. So in any county where the sample was large enough for us to do a county specific analysis, we're going to do those first. And then the next brief might be the essential versus non-essential workers, but I'm very open to hearing if there's some that would be more critical first, because we haven't, we're still right in the middle of the county level analyses. So we can pivot very quickly if there's something that's more critical for any of the efforts that are going on. I know, one bit of feedback we received from one of the large anti-hunger organizations was needing some specific data to go into their advocacy efforts around congressional action and needing to know bits of those data. So if there are other bits that you need to try to get state action or just to bring forward for some efforts to make sure we're filling some gaps, we're happy to pivot to that first.
The Spokane Food Policy Council just did a survey on our whole food system, trying to get an access plan together. It would be nice to see maybe what the questions are going to be before you publish them. If there's something we need to kind of back up data or a hole that we have that you guys could fill, that would be really helpful.
Great. Yeah. And I'm happy to share the survey questions in some, I don't know where we would put them, or Laura and Nicole can.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could share survey questions so you could see them and yeah.
We can either post them right in the chat box here for those who are on the call, or we can even just post them with a link on our website where we link to the actual survey itself, or to the University of Washington page with the research brief. Yeah, I know that Spokane. So, and I can't remember how many we got, respondents we got out of Spokane County. I know it went up in the end. We were working pretty hard to try to get that. So hopefully we did get a high enough number in Spokane to be able to do some analyses just on Spokane County as well, which I think would be really helpful for the work that you're doing with the Food Policy Council, Pat.
Thank you.
I see here a comment from Laura Raymond. Have you been able to consult with staff that work in these various food access and emergency food programs to get their take on the data? And we did, we have sent the brief out. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Hold on, I'm reading through it, Laura.
Okay.
Wait. So we did, so just to give a sense of kind of what happened before the survey went out, one thing we were really mindful of, we went out to and had conversations with as many public agencies as we could. So, you know, we talked from folks at state DOH and with the WIC offices and the EOCs, the emergency operating committees, and food banks. And I mean, we talked to as many people as we could. We shared the survey and had them, a lot of the granularity you see in, you know, how, like, remember all of the categories in the food bank categories about hours and transportation and all of that. Those were really brought to us by the agency folks who, you know, they listed off, these are the things that we would want to know about. So we were very mindful about trying to design the survey to get at the types of things that the information that they needed. And now we literally just, this brief is like barely been out a week. So step one was, you know, we shared the brief with everyone by email. And then now we're kind of having those follow-up conversations and trying to learn about, that's kind of how I found out about, you know, one of the anti-hunger organizations needing a little bit different data for their congressional action advocacy efforts. And so if there's someone we should talk to that you're thinking of, we're happy to do that to learn a little bit more, because we really are trying to be nimble and mindful of like the comprehensive policy response that needs to take place here in order to make sure people don't fall through the gaps.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I really feel like that was one of the things that it did stand out, because we did see an increase in the use of food assistance benefits overall. It was only 1%, but it was still in sort of the non-traditional space, I guess. It wasn't necessarily those traditional assistance programs that people were going for. It was all these other programs that we saw that were increasing. And so, like Laura was saying, just the accessing different programs did seem to be a huge struggle, especially those that are traditionally accessed in person. So that pivot as well, to be able to do a lot of that online, and whether people even had access to technology, that adequate technology that they would need. That was something we didn't drill into. that it would be really worth learning more about.
Yeah, and we did have, Laura, we did have just I saw the SNAP thing as well. Sorry, there were like
Yeah.
a couple of bits in there that that I am now reading through. Yeah, the online usage, my understanding is that it's still very limited in which retail and online outlets are accepting online SNAP, but I think they are working to expand it to Safeway, is what I heard, the Safeway retail, and is it Kroger that owns QFC?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a couple of large chains that are working to try to bring it into their retail stores as well. Yeah, there have been spin-offs. So you know, one of the things that happened in deploying the survey is that a few populations have come forward wanting to do a more tailored survey for their populations. And so, as Laura was mentioning, we're going to be working with the Northwest Tribal Epidemiology Center to alter this and do a different survey with American Indian and Alaska Native tribes in Washington State. But there was also interest from the farm worker communities. And so there is another survey not related to us or our efforts going on in California, Oregon, and Washington that you probably all know about. And the acronym is COFS, but I can't remember what that stands for. It's COFS, and something farm worker survey. And they were interested in seeing our survey and adding some of these food security questions, but they want to do some deeper dive interviews because their early survey efforts, and this won't surprise any of you on this call, but their early survey efforts really showed that the farm workers don't have internet access to even take surveys like this. The Wi-Fi is not available in the places they're residing. And so we're going to try to do a deeper dive reach out with that population as well.
I know Maggie is on the call today as well, and being so involved with SNAP Ed. I know this is probably the first chance you had to really see a lot of these results, but are you hearing or seeing similar stories or trends?
Well, I would say that in the data that was presented this morning, one of the things that struck me is the consistency about lack of transportation. And so I think that's pertinent for SNAP Ed. We are planning to share this information with all of our WASNAP Ed providers across the state. And I think it'll be interesting to see what response they have in programming that could come out of the results of the survey.
Great, thanks, Maggie.
Courtney is on too from our team. I don't know if Courtney, if you have anything to add.
I think the transportation piece is definitely huge, and I'm glad you called that out. And I think it will be good to share this with the rest of the SNAP Ed partners across the state to see what stands out to them and kind of how we can alter our programming to fit those new needs that we see. I also am really interested in what this farm workers survey will show us, because broadband issues and issues with Wi-Fi is definitely a huge thing that we're talking about at SNAP Ed. So I'm curious about those results and what the needs will be there too.
Thank you. I have another comment here from Jude in Clark County. Farmers markets are reporting increase in consistent use of SNAP with the $20 fresh match seems to make a big difference. How to get beyond anecdotal. It says the farmers market online accepts SNAP payment on time of pickup. And I know this is something that they're working on throughout the state. Really neat. So just a general comment more than anything else. Jude, did you have anything that you wanted to bring up Did you have anything you wanted to ask in particular?
Well, I missed the beginning of the presentation, so, but I was just wondering, I mean, I'm hearing that the data does give us some information, but I think that there's questions and ideas and assumptions running around that are, you know, how can we ground those in any way in terms of from this survey or subsequent surveys, or some way to collect some data at the farmers markets or from the SNAP recipients or SNAP Ed people. I don't know if there's any way to, you know, codify what's going on right now. Is that a no?
No, I was just not like nodding my head, like yeah. I'm sorry you can't see me on camera.
And I say I'm nodding.
I'm nodding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that that's something that, you know, as we continue to look at the data and try to understand some of these trends, being able to work with specific communities, like Jen was saying, to really ground truth some of the information and get a sense of what's happening. I mean, this is it's a snapshot. The survey was open for about 6 weeks. So, you know, it was a snapshot in time during COVID. And I think being able to look at something from a temporal perspective over time, you know, we're really interested in how we know these trends aren't static. And so how they're continuing to change, how people who are vulnerable and food insecure are either challenged by getting these benefits or which ones they're actually able to get and feel comfortable pursuing. And I think that's one of the things that we haven't been able to look at further is the big increases we did see in some of those other sort of food security packages, you know, so people accessing fresh boxes or these voucher cards, looking at, you know, where, and we don't necessarily report on an increase specifically in CSAs, but looking at how, do we have a question in there specific? I don't think we do, but I think that gets more into some of the sort of homesteading and self-sufficiency questions as well, but really trying to understand why some of these programs were increasing so much, and would we see the same type of increase if we did another 6-week period of time with those sort of other types of food assistance programs, or would we see now a big jump in those others that we might not have seen right off the bat? And like Laura was saying too, we see a big increase in the summer meal program, but a decrease in the actual school programs as well. And this survey was obviously being deployed kind of mid-June through July. So that would be typical. But I know across the state, we were also hearing that of the 600,000 kids or so that are enrolled in free and reduced programs, there was only about half of them that were accessing those programs once schools went to online learning or we're no longer doing face-to-face. And again, was that transportation? What were those constraints? And we did see a drop off in the school meals programs during the school year, or maybe it was because the school year was over, but so there was the two different programs. But I think there are some really interesting questions there still in terms of how things are continuing to change. And we're excited to have sort of a baseline. I think Jen mentioned that, like, part of the intentionality of this questionnaire was to really understand what were you doing before COVID, and what are you doing now, and what are the circumstances that led to those changes? Was it employment, lack of access to benefits, lack of access to transportation, your safety? So. It says here, Department of Health via the Fruit and Veg Incentive Program has collected data about SNAP and match usage has happened at farmers markets. Okay, great. Thank you, Laura. Well, the one thing that I wanted to bring up also, which we found really interesting, beyond the fact that people didn't have any a hardship accessing junk food. I shouldn't use the word junk food, but like, I guess all of those like naughty comfort foods that people want to eat or binge on, was the massive increase in flour purchasing and sort of these baking supply needs. And I think that's something that we did see across the food system, especially the Washington food system in general, where we saw a huge pivot of a lot of our smaller scale flour producers, or those that produce domestically, that aren't necessarily exporting all of their grain overseas, really shifting from what might have been bulk restaurant purchases to smaller bags for consumers. And we saw this with Karen Spring Mills. We saw it with Shepherd's Grain, with Fairhaven. They all of a sudden had these massive increase in demand for flour, and their need to shift some of their business practices to be able to provide that supply. And so that was something that we continued to talk about and saw in the news, but we actually saw it in our data as well. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jen. And we will, we can continue to answer questions. You saw the research team folks that were part of this group, and we meet every week, pretty much. We're still meeting every single week. So for anyone who was on the call today, or if you know of other partners that would be interested in this, please refer them to the research brief, which you can find at the University of Washington website. We'll make sure we have a copy on our website, or at least a link to the University of Washington website as well. And we're going to continue to work on the data analysis and have more results to be able to present to all you folks over time. And again, just a big shout out to thank all of you for helping us really spread the word about participating in this survey and helping us get just really great numbers. So it was fabulous to be able to see the participation that we got. And yeah, I just really want to thank Jen for all of her incredible work and for inviting the WSU Food Systems Program to collaborate on this as well.
Great. Thank you, everybody. You know, can I make one more comment, Laura? Because I realized as I was sitting back, many of you were asking about this change in food assistance, and we were all kind of surprised to see that the food assistance use didn't go up. And if you remember, I showed you that other link where other states are available. They're seeing the same exact trend everywhere. So that might be just something interesting to note, that it's not limited to Washington State. So these were kind of the hypotheses that I raised earlier about like why we may be seeing this. It might be because they're getting income assistance in other ways up until July 31st. And so when we go out for another time point, I suspect we will see very different usage numbers. So yeah, I kind of wanted to say that. And then the last thing I wanted to end with is just to say that I've had conversations with so many of you, and you're heroes. Like the work you're doing, I cannot believe sort of what everyone's doing to kind of get the system online or working in a way that people can access it. And I just want to say, keep it up, because I bet you these numbers would have looked a lot worse if not for all of your efforts. So thank you for all the work you do.
Thanks, Jen. So I want to go ahead and just open us up for a general discussion and time to share. If there are other topics that anyone wants to bring up, if you have suggestions for future programs, if there's anything that anyone wants to bring up specific, not just to COVID, but also to the fires that are going on right now. I know that there's been a lot of work happening through, I believe it was Culinary Breeding Network that pulled together a list of resources for Oregon farmers with OSU, specifically related to resources during fire. And I don't know if we have anything similar in Washington right now, but if anyone does have specific resources they want to share, that would be great.
I do have a few emergency response links and things that I would like to share with the group, but I have to pull them out of my email. So please carry on and I will find them.
Great, thanks, Nicole.
I have a couple resources. There's, at least on the Olympic Peninsula, Jefferson and Clallam and Kitsap County, we've secured thousands of KN95 masks for farmers and agricultural workers from our Department of Emergency Management, but also the Washington Farm Bureau has like hundreds of thousands of masks. So if people aren't engaging with the Farm Bureau, definitely contact them. They're shipping us a new shipment of masks for our farmers and ag workers. So it's a great resource out there if people aren't utilizing it already.
Thanks, Kelly. I know we sent something out on the listserv about that earlier this week, or it was in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, maybe that would be a good speaker we could have in the future, is actually someone from the Farm Bureau to talk specifically about that program.
This is kind of a no-brainer. This is Laura Raymond here, but you know, I think the FSA local offices are really wanting to hear from farmers about losses and anticipated losses. So we learned sadly from the last intense fire season that we had a few years ago, and how long it took to do that damage assessment and start to get federal relief. So FSA is trying to be more proactive about that. So it's, if you're working with folks, do not have them contact their local FSA office.
Great, thanks, Laura.
I can't seem to find the link that is affiliated with this, but what I wanted to share with you all is actually, it's a contact at the WSDA, and she works within their veterinary department and has specifically been handling response work related to animal related responses and emergency efforts. So if anyone knows of anyone that have animals that have suffered from any injuries from evacuation, fires, so on and so forth, she's helping to manage some of that triage work. And unfortunately, all I could find was her email. I thought there was a link on the website. So Laura Raymond, if you know anything about and could help me find something, I can share more.
Yeah, it's our animal services program generally under the state vet. So I would just encourage people to go to the WSDA website and the animal services information there. I can try to find a link for people here.
And I know that Washington temporarily relaxed, like, what was it, import permits from animals from Oregon, just so people could help shelter livestock in the interim during the fires, particularly for those farms hard hit in Oregon, where those animals need to be removed and sheltered. I think it was maybe the certificate of inspection. Like there's a health inspection that usually needs to be done when animals are being transported across state lines. And I don't think they're requiring that right now. But don't quote me on that. I'll try to find the information to share.
I heard the same thing. Yeah, there was a post from the WSDA about that.
Well, they're coming to Clark County, a lot of them. So we do hear about it directly. Do you think any of the relief efforts will be around the market disruption, or is this just going to be around direct hits from the fire? Because the smoke has had a really big impact on farmers' ability to work and marketability access issues. It's temporary, short term, but it's a big hit on top of other big hits. So I'm just curious whether that relief might expand.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Laura Raymond was mentioning the Farm Service Agency in particular, and them trying to understand the cost of the what it's done in terms of cost to producers. Laura, are you aware, are they interested at all in information from farmers markets associations or farmers markets as well?
I mean, it's worth calling. I don't think so. That's not traditionally who the FSA has really served. But I think, you know, in this year, we're dealing with disaster upon disaster, and USDA and FSA are being asked to be more responsive to local and regional marketing economies more in a more sophisticated way than just disaster payments directly to farms. But I mean, their focus is on disaster payments to farms, and they usually have very specific criteria for calculating those. But I would use this as a moment to plug actually a listening session that USDA is hosting on ensuring local and regionally marketing farms and marketing models, which is on September 30th. I've seen several posts about it, but we can try to post again. And I know it's conflicts with Washington Farmland Trust's big benefit. It's like the exact same time, and I'm sure that is probably way more fun. But for people who feel have things to say about the need to have better protection available for local and regionally oriented producers, this listening session is really important. So take a look out for that.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. Anything else that anyone would like to share? Future topics?
Laura, this is Gwen. Were you going to put that into the chat or?
At the FSA information?
Yeah, Laura Raymond, sorry.
I'm just looking for it now. I've sent it out a handful of times, so I'm just looking for it now.
Okay.
Okay, well, give you a little bit of your Friday back. Oh, I see here we have a note. Yes, I was just going to bring that up. Marissa from Sustainable Connections just shared that Sarah Sutherland is going to be moving on. She's moving back to Texas in a couple of weeks. And I think, was it yesterday or today was her last day? And she just sent out, she has here a kudo board. If you want to contribute to that, you can go ahead, and we just want to wish Sarah the best. She's been so incredible to work with and such just an amazing leader throughout so much of the food systems work that's happening, not only in the Pacific Northwest region up in Whatcom and Skagit, but across the whole state. She's just really been such a great anchor, and we're really sad to see her go, but really, really excited about her being able to be back near family down in Texas. So. I believe next week we're going to hear about the third round of the USDA food box program. So we're still pulling speakers together for next week, but I believe they're in the third round of contracts, and those have slightly changed. We just wanted to give folks an update. We talked about that earlier in the spring when the program was just kind of rolling off the press. And so being able to provide an update on how that program's going. If you have any other ideas or things that you want to hear about, please let us know, and we'll get you set up or get your speakers set up over the next few weeks to participate in our hub meetings. I see here Laura just posted the feasibility of ensuring local food production. We'll make sure that gets up on our calendar of our calendar of events as well. I just want to thank everyone for participating today. I want to wish you all the best. I know that these are really challenging times, and I appreciate the time that we get to spend together on Fridays, and just echo what Jen said about all the incredible work that you're doing across the state to help support Washingtonians. the food system, not only during COVID, but beyond. So thank you all for the work that you're doing, and have a safe weekend that is hopefully less smoke-filled than it has been for the last few days. So be well, everyone, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.